Why are you talking to my child? The sharp tone of Amelia Wren echoed through the crystal-lit hallway of her estate, perched high above the coast of Westbridge. She was 40, elegant and unapproachable, heir to a global tech conglomerate. Before her stood an unfamiliar scene, a dark-skinned woman in a worn-out apron, kneeling on the floor beside her 7-year-old son, Elijah. He was non-verbal, diagnosed with severe developmental delays. The woman, Maria Estevez, rose slowly, her movements calm, precise. She had been working as a housekeeper in that mansion for 3 months, silent, invisible. No one knew she had once been a university linguist, teaching phonetics and cognitive language theory in 3 different countries, before life collapsed under hospital bills and family debt. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wren," Maria said gently. "I was just what?" Amelia stepped closer, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. "Elijah hasn't said a word in over 2 years. He doesn't talk. He doesn't respond. And now I find you, here." Whispering what exactly into his ear, Elijah sat cross-legged, holding a brightly illustrated book. His pale green eyes gleamed with a light Maria had seen before. Not in brokenness, but in brilliance waiting for a bridge. "He came to me," she said simply. "I was cleaning and he sat down beside me." That wasn't the full truth. For weeks now, Maria had noticed how Elijah's gaze followed her lips when she softly recited words from other tongues. First Portuguese, then Swahili. Yesterday, he'd whispered back, "Bom dia. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let us know, in the comments, and where you're watching from, because voices like yours deserve to be heard too." Amelia ripped the book from Elijah's hands. It was in German. Where did this even come from? "The library, Ma'am. I was sorting through the shelves. And you thought experimenting on my child was acceptable?" Her voice cracked like ice. "He's autistic. He doesn't communicate. He doesn't learn. The best doctors in this country have told me so." Maria felt her throat tighten. Not with fear, but with familiarity. She had seen that same misjudged look in dozens of children. Not failures, just misunderstood. "With respect, Ms. Wren," she said, softly. "Some children just need to be spoken to in the language their heart understands." Amelia let out a dry laugh. "You? A cleaner? You're telling me about my son?" "It's not advice," Maria said, sinking again to the floor beside Elijah. "It's just an open door. And then it happened." Elijah lifted his gaze, met hers, and whispered, "Merci, madame." Silence fell like snowfall. Amelia's breath caught. He spoke in French. Maria only nodded, her eyes holding back emotion. "Children like Elijah aren't broken, ma'am. They simply speak in ways we haven't learned to hear." Amelia looked from her son to Maria, then back to the boy, now absorbed in a book, his fingers gently flipping through the pages as though they had always been alive. "For 2 years," she murmured. "How did you know?" Maria smiled. Not smug, but as someone who once sat on the other side of disbelief. "Let's just say, I've had to find my own language before too. In that silent, frosty hall where wealth could purchase everything, except empathy. A woman the world barely noticed had just sparked a change no one saw coming. Because when you've been overlooked your whole life, there's nothing louder than proving someone wrong without even raising your voice." The next morning, Amelia had made up her mind. She summoned Maria to her private office, a room lined with awards, photo ops with politicians, and framed moments, from charity galas meant to scream virtue louder than sincerity. "I need to clarify something," Amelia said coldly, without offering a seat. "What happened yesterday? It was a fluke. Elijah sometimes makes odd noises. It doesn't mean anything." Maria stood in silence, hands gently clasped in front of her. "I understand, ma'am," she replied. "I want you to stay away from him. No more contact. None." Amelia watched her for a moment, suspicion tightening in her jaw. In fact, I think it's better if you stick to the basement and utility zones. Let the other staff manage areas where Elijah spends time. Maria nodded, but her thoughts spiraled. If only she knew. If Amelia knew that she held a doctorate in applied linguistics from the University of Edinburgh, that she specialized in language acquisition for neurodivergent children, that she had published studies read by top researchers in her field. Of course, Ms. Wren. Just cleaning, Maria answered. But Amelia wasn't done. She leaned back in her chair, an unsettling grin touching her lips. And let me be clear, don't get any ideas. Elijah is profoundly autistic. That's not changing. 3 elite neurologists told me so. He won't speak like other children. He won't live like them either. Each sentence landed like a closed door. But Maria's expression didn't shift. She had heard this speech before, from 43 other parents, all convinced their children were unreachable. Today, those same children were scholars, polyglots, engineers, thriving. I understand your concern, Maria said gently. Amelia scoffed. Concern? It's not concern, it's reality, and I won't have my son turned into a test subject by someone unqualified. That afternoon, while Maria was reorganizing cleaning supplies in the storage room, she heard careful footsteps descending the basement stairs. It was Dr. Reuben Lynn, the family's pediatric specialist. His face was unreadable. Forgive the intrusion, he said, lowering his voice, but I'd like a word about Elijah. Maria straightened up. Is everything all right? Actually, what I witnessed yesterday, Elijah speaking in French, was the first intentional verbal response we've had in over 2 years. Dr. Lynn glanced around, ensuring they were alone. I've practiced medicine for over 2 decades, and I can tell when a child is reacting randomly versus when they're truly responding to a specific stimulus. Maria's pulse quickened. And what do you believe this was? Do you have any formal training in special education? He asked carefully. Maria hesitated. The truth could open a door, or shut it forever. She studied his face for a moment. Dr. Lynn, she said softly, if I told you that I hold a PhD in applied linguistics and that I spent 5 years researching language development in neurodivergent children, what would you do with that information? Dr. Lynn blinked slowly. Not in disbelief, but as if something in his mind had just quietly shifted. You're telling me you have a doctorate? Nordland University, Maria answered quietly. My thesis focused on multilingual communication in neurodivergent children. I've published 17 peer-reviewed studies in international journals. Dr. Lynn slowly sank onto a nearby crate, shaking his head. What's a linguistics expert doing mopping floors in a mansion like this? Maria drew in a steady breath. Life doesn't always ask permission, Doctor. My mother fell, gravely ill. I lost my position at the university and needed money quickly to cover her care. That was a year ago. Dr. Lynn sat in silence, processing her words. And Elijah, do you believe you can help him? I don't believe, Maria said, her voice calm, unwavering. I know. He's not profoundly autistic as they claim. Yes, he shows traits on the spectrum, but what he's truly living with is selective mutism, combined with heightened auditory sensitivity. His mother treats him like he's broken, so he's built his own silence as protection. And how exactly do you know that? Maria didn't flinch. 43 similar cases, Doctor. Over the last 5 years, children labelled unreachable. Today, 38 of them speak 2 or more languages. They study. They thrive. Dr. Lynn sat quietly for a long moment. Then he spoke. Elijah has a checkup with me tomorrow. Amelia wants to increase his medication. Says he's regressing, that he's starting to imagine things. He's not regressing, Maria said firmly. He's evolving. For the first time in 2 years, he's found a voice, a method of expression that feels natural to him. I can see that, Dr. Lynn admitted. He pulled a small card from his coat pocket and handed it to her. My personal number. If you're truly willing to help this child, I'll find a way to offer discreet medical support for your work. But it'll need to stay between us. After he left, Maria stood alone, holding the card. And for the first time in what felt like forever, an actual plan began to take shape in her mind. That evening, while Amelia was at a networking dinner at the Westbridge Social Club, Maria did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She called the university. Professor Adler? It's Maria Esteves. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maria, where have you been? Your research was referenced in 3 global conferences this month. Even Cambridge has been trying to reach you. I'm in a temporary situation, Maria replied. But I need a favor. I need my research files, especially the intervention protocols for selective mutism. An hour later, Maria ended the call feeling something she'd nearly forgotten. Hope. Professor Adler had promised to send everything quietly, enough to begin building a custom language reintroduction program for Elijah. But what Maria didn't know was that Sandra, the senior housekeeper, had overheard the last part of the conversation from the top of the stairs, and by morning, that information would land in Amelia Wren's hands. Meanwhile, upstairs in Elijah's room, the boy sat on the floor, flipping through a book he'd found under the bed. It had pictures of animals, and their names in 6 different languages. A little gift planted intentionally by a former professor. Dog, chien, hund, perro, he whispered to himself, each word flowing like a song in a world that had once sounded so quiet. Because sometimes real revolutions don't start with anger, but with whispers, unlikely alliances, and the steady courage of those who know that the fiercest storms often arrive in silence. The next morning, Sandra knocked on Amelia's office door with a look of smug urgency. Ms. Wren, I think you'll want to hear this. It's about the cleaning woman. Amelia glanced up from her spreadsheets, already irritated. What is it now, Sandra? Well, last night I overheard her talking about university research, scientific articles. Sandra hesitated, then delivered the final blow. She said something about being a doctor. Amelia blinked. Dr. Maria? Yes, ma'am, Sandra continued. She mentioned working with over 40 children like Elijah. I think she's pretending to be someone she's not, trying to get close to the boy. Amelia's mind spun. A housekeeper who spoke about neuroscience, who referenced academic studies, who made Elijah speak. The puzzle pieces were fitting together in a way that made her skin crawl. Bring her here, now. 15 minutes later, Maria walked into the office. Amelia stood behind her desk, a laptop open in front of her, her expression unreadable. Sit. Maria sat down, her face calm, her hands still. You lied to me, Amelia said, turning the screen toward her. On it, a faculty page from Nordland University, Dr. Maria Esteves, award-winning linguist, researcher, specialist in language development for neurodivergent children. I never lied, Maria replied. I just didn't share what no one ever asked. Amelia slammed her palm on the desk. You let me believe you were just a cleaning lady, uneducated, unqualified. All this time, you were a doctor. Why would it have mattered? Maria asked, her voice still steady. From the very beginning, you made it clear I was invisible, that my only role was to stay silent and sweep floors, that people like me had nothing to offer. Something shifted in Amelia's chest, a flicker of shame, though she didn't name it. That's different. You should have told me. What for? Maria's voice sharpened slightly. So you could find new ways to humiliate me. So you could remind me that even with a doctorate, I'd still just be an employee in your eyes? That's when the door flew open. Elijah came running in, with Dr. Lin right behind him. Maria! Maria! He shouted joyfully, in Portuguese. Then, switching seamlessly. Je connais les chansons, in French. ¿Puedes enseñarme más palabras? In Spanish. Amelia froze. Her son, who hadn't spoken in 2 years, was, and now stringing together full sentences. In 3 languages, Dr. Lin stepped forward calmly. Amelia, I want to show you something. He placed a tablet on the desk and tapped play. One video after another. Elijah, counting to 10 in German, reciting the alphabet in Cantonese, singing a lullaby in Arabic. 7 languages, Dr. Lin said. In just 3 weeks, not only can he speak, he understands grammatical patterns across completely different language systems. His brain is functioning at a remarkable cognitive level. Amelia stared at the screen, then at Maria, then at Elijah. How is this even possible? Maria stood slowly, then knelt beside Elijah, resting her hand on his shoulder. Because he was never profoundly autistic, she said. He experienced emotional trauma and chose silence to survive. But when he found safety and a way to express himself, he didn't just improve, he flourished. Elijah turned to his mother, and for the first time in years, looked directly into her eyes. Mama, he said in perfect English. Maria says, I'm smart. Then in Italian, lei mi ha insegnato come parlare, e voglio parlare. Amelia's knees gave out. She knelt on the floor, tears filling her eyes. Her son, whom she had shielded like fragile glass, stood before her, speaking with more clarity and grace than she'd ever imagined possible. Elijah, she whispered. You could always speak? Yes, Mama, but every time I tried, you looked so sad. So I stopped. Then, in French, his voice barely above a whisper. Mais Maria, elle m'a écouté. Silence swallowed the room, but it wasn't empty. It was sacred. Amelia looked at Maria, who stood silently across from her, not triumphant but deeply moved. I didn't know, Amelia murmured. I really didn't. I know, Maria replied gently. But now, you do. The question is, what will you do with that truth? Dr. Lin stepped forward and placed a reassuring hand on Amelia's shoulder. Elijah needs to keep working with Maria. His growth has been nothing short of remarkable. But if we stop now, we risk everything. Amelia turned her gaze to her son, who was stacking colored blocks and softly counting in Japanese, then back to Maria, the woman who had quietly reshaped her home, her family, her heart. I need to apologize to you, Amelia said, her voice trembling. And I need to ask you to stay, not as staff, not as help, but as Elijah's teacher, as the person who gave me back my son. Maria smiled, not with pride, but with peace. I'll stay, she said, but only on one condition. Elijah isn't a miracle. He's not a trophy. He's just a brilliant little boy who deserves to be loved, not for what he can do, but for who he is. Amelia nodded slowly, finally, understanding. Just then, Elijah walked over. He took both women's hands in his. His eyes sparkled. Mama Maria, he said in Portuguese, are we a real family now? And in that moment, 3 lives shifted, forever. Because sometimes the greatest revolutions don't begin in headlines or boardrooms, but in the quiet truth of a child finding his voice and a mother learning to truly listen. 6 months later, the Wren estate no longer echoed in silence. The cold walls once filled with emptiness were now alive, with laughter, multilingual chatter, and Elijah's sweet voice ringing through every corridor. Mama, guess what I learned in Swedish today? He shouted from the garden. Kärlek means love. Amelia looked up from her laptop, seated under the porch's morning sun. She smiled, a real smile, the kind that had once felt unfamiliar. That's beautiful, sweetheart. And where's Miss Maria? She's filming another video, Elijah beamed. Then, switching fluently to Spanish. Hoy tenemos muchos estudiantes nuevos. The YouTube channel, Learning with Elijah, had exploded. In just 4 months, Maria's teaching methods, with Elijah as her living example, had touched more than 2 million followers. Donations and educational grants were flooding in. The non-profit foundation Amelia had launched in partnership with Maria had already raised over $500,000, dedicated to neurodivergent education. But that was only the beginning. Harvard, Oxford, and Sorbonne, all competing to offer Maria a full professorship. 3 top publishing houses battled for her memoir, The Language of the Heart: How Multilingualism Unlocked the Silent Mind, a bestseller even before its official release. That afternoon, Amelia glanced across the room. "Dr. Estevez," she said proudly, using the title now always spoken with honor, "we've just received 5 new requests from public schools who want to apply your program." Maria, now in a sleek blazer, surrounded by learning materials, smiled. 15 schools in 6 months. I never dreamed this could reach so far. And Sandra? Amelia asked softly, referring to the ex-housekeeper who had tried to sabotage everything. Maria looked up but didn't answer right away. She didn't need to, because some victories don't require revenge. Just impact, just change. Just the quiet sound of a child speaking where once there had only been silence. "I heard she's still job hunting," Maria said calmly. "No surprise. Wealthy families aren't too keen on hiring someone with a reputation for spreading gossip about their employers online." She wasn't bitter, only honest. "Karma," she added, "has its own rhythm." Just then, Dr. Lin walked onto the porch, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of smile that only delivers big news. "Ladies, I have incredible updates. Your article has just been accepted by Global Neuroscience Today. And the American Pediatric Council wants you to present your method at the national conference next month." Amelia exhaled slowly, watching her son in the garden, chatting, in fluent German with the landscaper as he built a tower from twigs and stones. 6 months ago, she had feared Elijah would never speak, never smile, never live freely. Now, he was more expressive than most kids his age. "You know what amazes me most?" Amelia asked, turning to Maria. "It's not just the languages, or the school invitations. It's the light in his eyes. He's happy." Maria nodded. "Children like Elijah. They don't need fixing, Amelia. They just need someone to understand the way they shine." That evening, as they gathered for dinner under warm porch lights, Elijah stood beside the table with a folded paper in his hands. "Mama, Miss Maria, I wrote something. Can I read it?" The women glanced at each other and smiled. Elijah cleared his throat. "Dear Mama and dear Miss Maria. Before, it felt like I was trapped in a glass box. I could see the world, but no one could hear me. Miss Maria didn't break the box. She helped me see that there never was a box. And Mama, thank you for letting her show me that I've always been perfect, just the way I am." Neither woman could stop the tears. They didn't try. 3 months later, Maria stood center stage at the International Conference on Special Education, in front of 5,000 teachers, researchers, and child therapists. Elijah stood beside her, confident, proud. "My name is Elijah Wren," he said into the microphone, his voice filling the auditorium. "A year ago, doctors said I might never speak. Today, I speak 9 languages. Because one woman believed I had a voice from the very beginning, she just helped me find the key to use it." The audience rose as one, a standing ovation that brought tears to the eyes of parents and educators from every corner of the world. Amelia, watching from the front row, felt her heart swell. They weren't witnessing a miracle. They were witnessing proof that the only real limits are the ones we place on each other. Maria stepped to the mic, her voice unwavering. "A year ago, I was invisible to this society. Today, I stand here not because I changed, but because someone finally saw me. Elijah was always capable. I simply gave him the space to show the world what was already inside him." Afterward, a journalist approached her backstage. "Dr. Estevez, when did you know Elijah was different?" Maria smiled and rested her hand gently on the boy's shoulder. The first day, when he looked me in the eyes, all children are extraordinary. Some just need a different language to share their magic. Today, 2 years later, the Elijah and Maria Foundation has changed the lives of over 10,000 children across the country. Amelia has become a passionate advocate for inclusive education policies, and Maria proved that the most powerful revenge against prejudice is not tearing others down, but building something so brilliant that even your critics are forced to look up and recognize your worth. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more stories of transformation, resilience, and the simple truth that no one's value can ever be measured by the color of their skin, the work they do, or where they come from. Real change begins when we choose to see the light in others, even when the world chooses to look away.